Hey everyone, it's Jocelyn, Executive Director at Great Marriages, coming to you tonight for our The Apple Doesn't Fall Far from the Tree Family of Origin event. Unfortunately, we couldn't have you here in our building to join us for a catered dinner and the event like we normally do, but we're so happy that you registered and that you can join us online. We've had to make some shifts during COVID, but we're so happy to still be able to offer you quality programming to help you stay close and connected. So if you don't know anything about Great Marriages, this is your first event. Our mission is to prepare and strengthen relationships. So we work with singles, dating, engaged, married couples. The second part of our mission is to enrich marriages. And the third part is to keep families together. That's our ultimate goal. Let's keep you connected. Let's keep you strong and thriving, even through crazy times like we're in right now. So tonight we have a special treat. Pastor Andy Shanholtz is going to bring you the talk on family of origin. So what does that mean, family of origin? That's the family that you grew up in. And how does that family affect your relationships today? So if you're married or you're engaged or you're dating, you're single looking for someone to marry, how does that family of origin impact your relationships? And it does. So we're looking forward to having Pastor Andy share with you. It is a faith-based event, so he's going to shortly open us up in a word of prayer, present, and then I'll be back after he's done. Enjoy.
Father, I want to thank you for this opportunity to be able to share from your word how our family of origin affects our marriage and our relationships. So, Lord, we want to commit this time into your hands. We ask that you are honored and glorified by what we say, by what we do. But, Lord, I just pray that this understanding that will be coming forth from this teaching will help us to have the type of marriages that you have so desired for all of us. In Jesus' name, amen. My wife and I will be celebrating 39 years this coming Saturday. That's a miracle in itself. I know when we got married, we said divorce was not an option, but she kind of reminded me that this isn't until death do us part, and she does the cooking. So I was going to hire a food taster for us, but we've made it this far. God has been really good for both of us, and we grow. And I can honestly say that we are probably closer now than we have ever been in our relationship. You learn some things. And one of the things that I learned, that I came from an extremely screwed up family. And when I began to understand how the family of origin affects marriages, because it's so easy to blame the other person. If only they would, or only if they would do this, or if they would change. And it's so easy. But one thing I've learned, the only person I can change is myself. I can't change my spouse, but I can change myself. And so if I focus upon getting me healthy, you know something? They have a tendency to become healthy as well. And I find that it becomes a greater relationship. So I want to start by, the title of the message is called The Apple Doesn't Fall Far from the Tree. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I've actually written a 9-hour study. And again, I don't know how long the Lord's going to have me here, but I did a 9-hour study upon the Song of Solomon. And the Song of Solomon is really a book. I believe it's not just an allegory. I believe, if God places so much emphasis on marriage, shouldn't there be at least one book in the Bible that talks about marriage and relationships? I believe that's the Song of Solomon. So I have really developed this whole teaching upon starting from dating, to courtship, to the engagement, to the marriage night. In fact, the honeymoon is so explicit in the Song of Solomon that you could not, as a Jewish boy, you could not read it till you're past 16. It is that graphic. And generally, I like to teach in the wintertime when we can open the windows, because it gets pretty warm when you start teaching this. But then he talks about faithful fidelity and commitment to each other. And it has 2 chapters upon conflict resolution. Isn't that interesting? 2 chapters on conflict resolution in the Song of Solomon. So that's a teaching that I've done as a weekend workshop. Let's get together for a whole day Saturday, start at 9 o'clock and go to about 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and we kind of cram some things together. So it's a fun thing to do. So something to keep in mind if we want to do something creative over Valentine's. You know, I can come just do a whole workshop on the Song of Solomon and just have a lot of fun. I've got interaction, discussion questions. We can set up tables. But these are things that I've done in my own research to help me understand me. Not just understand my wife, but to understand me. Why do I do some of the things that I do? Why do certain things trigger me and it doesn't seem to bother anybody else, but why does it bother me? So I want to start by reading Genesis chapter 2, verses 23 and 24. And it says this, "And Adam said, 'This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called a woman because she was taken out of man. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh.'" I have found out that most of the time married couples take their parents with them. Maybe not physically, but emotionally and behaviorally. For all of us, our family has had a very large impact on who we are, what our values are, our belief systems, and how we view ourselves. In fact, this initial socialization and the bonds created will often have an impact far beyond our childhood. It is, if the childhood was involved in trauma or other issues, then it can be seen as a family of origin issue. Now, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree is a phrase that's used to describe how a child usually has similar character or similar qualities to their parents. Now, family of origin refers to the family you grew up with. It doesn't have to be a biological family. It can be a family that you grew up with, spent a lot of time with. The people who lived with you during part of your childhood. These people will strongly influence who we become. When I was 15, I had to go into foster care, me and all my siblings. We were all separated. My parents divorced when I was 13. At 14, I contracted hepatitis, and it was in the hospital for 2 months. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. People still can't figure out what's wrong with me. but anyway, I was very sick, and so then social services moved in, and what happened, my aunt and uncle, I grew up without any running water or indoor plumbing, so the only type of heat we had in West Virginia where I grew up was coal and wood. So there wasn't turning a knob to turn up the heat. It was me getting up, pouring coal into it, taking a poker, poking a hole in it so the fire would begin to flare up again, and putting wood to engage the flame. Well, I was so sick, I was wrapped in an electric blanket. Nobody was home. My aunt and uncle found me wrapped that way. I was on the verge of really dying. And they took me to the hospital, and it took several trips for them to figure out what was wrong with me. Social services got word of that. Your parents must be very negligent. Well, mom's not here, and my dad is who knows where with my siblings. And so social services comes in, I get put into a foster home for 2 years. At the age of 15, 16, and 17, my teenage years, which are probably the toughest years to take someone who's an angry person. But this family happened to be friends of mine. They were my best friends in high school or in grade school growing up. This family took me in. The one thing I learned from this family was what family looked like, what healthy family looked like, eating together, working together. They were farmers, worked very hard, but they also played very hard, fishing, camping, because it was all boys. So I learned that I always said to myself, when I get married, I want my family to look like that. My foster family had a great impact. Jean and I have been foster parents over the years. We've had one beautiful daughter who's now 32 years old, has blessed us with 4 grandkids, and she's just been amazing, but we've only been able to have one child. So we took in foster kids probably for over 6 to 10 years. We've had different young ladies that were always teenage girls. Well, boys were tough. Teenage girls are even tougher. And so we had these. We did this to be an influence in their lives and tried to sow the love of Jesus into their lives. But they were treatment foster kids, which means they needed a lot more professionally than what we could actually give them, because I hadn't studied this area yet. I mean, I wish I knew what I did now and now have them, but back then I didn't. I mean, you couldn't touch them, you couldn't look at them wrong. I mean, it was just unbelievable. But they had to go to counseling all the time. They were constantly getting kicked out of school. I'd get a phone call in my office, "Pastor, your daughter's been arrested Wait a minute, my daughter never get arrested. Then, okay, oh yeah, it's my foster daughter. So I go pick her up, bring her home, and things like this. But we always have this type of disruptions in our lives. But to me, growing up, that was normal. Disruption was always normal because we didn't have a normal family life. It was always in chaos. So if your family of origin was one that provided a relatively healthy and functional environment, then it could be easy for you to make adjustments to accommodate the needs of your mate. I mean, it's tough when you get married. I mean, I think our first year was probably the toughest. And then getting to know each other. I did a teaching called The Secrets of a Happy Marriage, where I talk about the various viruses that attack our marriages at different seasons of life. And then to help people understand, to be able to be proactive in preventing some things happening negatively in your marriage. Most marriages, in America, the average marriage lasts 7 years. After 7 years, then generally it's a divorce. But the first 3.5 years are the toughest. And because of getting to learn about each other, getting to know each other, and yet they haven't learned how to adjust to differences. And so this creates a lot of conflict. Because how many know that when you grow up in a home, basically the thing that you were taught, your brain tells you that that's the right way to do things. Well, your spouse also thinks that because they were given a value system or a set of instructions of how to do something, and they believe that the way they were taught was the right way. Now, marriage is a blending of two different styles of doing things, so there's going to be has to be some give and take on both sides. This can involve making allowances for differences in how tasks get accomplished versus simply accusing your spouse of doing the things the wrong way. You ever, guys, you come in, you want to help your wife do the laundry, you want to fold the laundry, and she says, that's not how you fold that. So wives, here's a secret. Don't criticize because they'll quit helping you. Encourage them. Oh, that's great. So my wife does laundry. I fold it, put it away. So, I mean, it works well for us. I'm a neat freak, so I clean the house. So most guys want to take me out and beat me up after I tell the churches when I'm preaching that I clean the house. What? Now my wife's going to expect that. What? Pastor, what are you doing? Yeah, we're going to take you out. We're going to have a men's ministry. We're going to teach you some things. But my Bible says, husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. Very sacrificial. And that's why you can't really have a book of do's and don'ts. Every married couple are different because our family of origins are different. And it's a matter of blending those two together to be able to help each other reach their full potential in Christ. This is what marriage is all about. It's helping us to reach our full potential in Christ so we can honor God, glorify God, and build each other up so that each of us are representing the values and presenting the grace and character of Jesus Christ to the world that needs guidance. They don't need people to tell them, they need people to show them. How do we live life together? How do we resolve conflict? How do we do these things? That's the purpose of marriage, is that we would glorify God. This is why God has a great sense of humor. He always seems to bring a mate to you that is completely opposite of you. Because if they were just like you, what fun would that be? That would be kind of boring, wouldn't it? I always ask the question, how would you like to be married to you? How would you like to be married to you? I know, and somebody said, yeah, man, that'd be great. Call me for counseling. You really need help. This is more than just surface here. But if your family of origin, if it struggled with alcoholism like mine did, if your family of origin had abuse, mental illness, or infidelity, which mine did, it can mean that you have to unlearn the unhealthy coping mechanisms and behaviors of your childhood and then begin to relearn healthy ones. By not doing so, you can end up repeating the negative patterns that you grew up with. It wasn't uncommon for me as a young boy catching my mom in bed with another man, another husband. That's very traumatic for a young boy that thinks that's not right. It's not normal. But I've seen it more than once. And it really affected me because every child believes they have a right to their biological parent. This is why divorce is so hard. Because we are wired to say, it's not fair, it's not right for me not to have my parents in my life. And so you always are hoping that one of the departing spouse would eventually come back. You always hope that. And so there's a lot of anger that I grew up with, a lack of trust. I couldn't have a healthy relationship with a girl until I met my wife. I just didn't trust them. My thinking was, when are you going to leave if we have an issue, if we have a conflict? When are you leaving me? And even married 39 years, still think that sometimes. That's how deep the wound is. But again, we have to tell ourselves, no. We've broken that negative cycle in our marriage, and we're trusting God to bring healing and wholeness to our relationship. It's also important to point out that, again, if you do come from a family of origin that experienced divorce, as I just mentioned, it can affect your view of marriage. Even though you may commit to never divorcing yourself, which is what my wife and I have done, a child of divorce might be missing key conflict resolution skills and other gaps in their marriage. Part of the reality of our family of origin is that we take how our parents treat us and we use it as a measure of how well others are treating us. This is especially true of our spouses. If a parent seems to neglect us or has created a sense of anxiety within us, it can be easy to transfer that meaning to the actions of your spouse. As I mentioned, I would ask my wife, when are you leaving? And see, her dad was the type of guy my wife came from an extremely healthy family. You take someone that has a very extremely healthy family, go to church together, vacation together, do life together, and then you bring in a person that has never had a family vacation in his life until I married my spouse. I was a very athletic person in school. Never once did my parents ever come to a basketball game that I started. Never. I shouldn't say never. My dad came one time, was so drunk he didn't know where he was at. So these things, and so I come in not being able to trust anybody's word, or are they going to really keep their word to what they tell me because of the divorce? I don't know if my wife is going to continue to be faithful to me, because the only thing I've associated with a female is that they were unfaithful. You see, I had to unlearn those things and begin to know that God can heal that. So I want to share 3 common family of origin issues and how they translate into our adulthood. 3 very common family of origin issues and how they translate into adulthood. Number 1 is witnessing high conflict and volatile relationships. If you grew up as a child and you experienced a constant yelling and bickering as you grow up, that can translate into the belief that these are normal and acceptable ways to communicate. Gene and I never yelled at each other. Now, we've had some discussions, if you want to call it that. We've had some disagreements because we're totally different people. But we've never yelled at each other. And my daughter has never witnessed us yelling, or I've never yelled at her. Because when you begin to yell, you lose control of the situation. And the person that you are yelling at are actually the one that's in control. Think about that. If I maintain a conversational tone in our conflict resolution, I'm setting the tone of how we should communicate, how we should interact. But if you begin to raise your voice, I begin to raise my voice to mirror what you're doing, then you have control of the situation. If I can maintain control by maintaining the tone I want to set in this resolution, this conflict resolution, then we could talk as adults, not as an adult-child. You see, it's easy for us to revert to adult-child relationship. And so it's interesting. I've known so many families that the only way of communication is yelling. It's like watching CNN and Fox News. The one who yells the loudest wins the debate. No, that's stupid, isn't it? Just to think that way. But it's not the tone. It's learning how to value each other person. Because every person is created in the image of God. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. And so our goal is not to try to win every argument. Our goal is, how can I help this person reach their full potential in Christ? You see, in fact, this can be a real source of conflict. My daughter, when she married her husband, they were from a Yellers. So we always jokingly say, oh, they are a Cardis, because they're all very loud, all my grandkids. And we're very soft-spoken, and we like to have fun. But you can see the different dynamics based upon family of origin, how it has affected their parenting skills as well. And so if you are subjected to a lot of high conflict and volatile relationship, these children can grow up with high levels of anxiety and trust issues. They believe that all relationships are inherently shaky and no relationship can be trusted, which can impact the levels of intimacy in their marriage as adults. Here's a phrase that I use a lot, and I'll probably close with this phrase, is that we have to learn to attack the problem, not each other in marriage. Learn to attack the problem and not each other. Because, we have to see each other as people who have value and need to be treated with value. And also, if there's always this yelling and conflict, that can mean that the audio channel has shut down. You see, we have an audio channel for learning. We have a visual and a kinesthetic channels to how we gather information. And a lot of times, if a person's, and every baby is born with all three of these channels open, normal. But as they begin to grow, for example, if you're constantly yelling at the child and telling them to be quiet, their audio begins to shut down. And this is why sometimes when you're talking with people, they get louder and louder because they're not hearing you. Or if they just say, "Don't you look at me like that," then their visual shuts down. And you can walk into their house and it looks like a bomb just exploded. But they don't see the chaos because their visual has shut down. Or don't you act that way towards me. Don't you give me that emotion, which means my kinesthetic begins to shut down. Don't you touch that. So you're saying you do not have permission to explore and to allow your emotions to develop. Don't you give me that angry look. Anger is an emotion. It's a secondary emotion. So why are you angry with me? And so sometimes children, when they get yelled at in these various channels, then those areas will shut down and they can't hear you. So I give an assessment in some of my marriage things that I do to find out, what is your dominant channel? Is your channels all three open or 2 out of the 3 open? This is why sometimes when husbands and wives talk, they don't understand because you're in 2 different channels. One is audio, one may be visual. And a lot of times it's listening to the verbs that they use in their communication. If they're using a lot of visual. Do you see what I'm saying? Now I'm talking visual. Can you hear what I'm saying? Then I'm back into audio. Oh, I think we should just hug each other and just share that how good people really are. That's my emotional kinesthetic. So listening to these verbs will help you to understand what channels open. But it's really critical to get these channels back open. As a teacher, I have to communicate in all 3 channels. This is why we have PowerPoint on the Sunday services. This is why we have a bulletin in your hand. That's kinesthetic. You're touching something, and then you're hearing me talk. So all 3 channels are being reached when I teach. And so a lot of times, a lot of husband-wife conflict is a result that they're in 2 different channels. It'd be like me speaking Spanish and one of them speaking English. I see the mouth moving, I hear words coming out, but I don't understand anything that's being said. It's because the channels have been shut down, and you have to be intentional about opening those channels back up, which can be taught. All right, the second common family or origin issue that translates to adulthood is childhood trauma. Childhood trauma. Abuse is a very complicated issue, so the effects on children who live through it can be varied. The results could be low self-esteem, trust issues, and even sexual and intimacy problems. Listen to this statistic. 95% of marriage conflict stems from unresolved issues back around the ages of 8 and 9 years old. 95% of marital conflict is a result of unresolved issues that I had at the age of 8 and 9. We as pastors are performing weddings for 8 and 9-year-old kids emotionally. Their ability to resolve conflict, their ability to give and receive love is that of a child. 1 Corinthians 13:11 says, "When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things." 1 Corinthians 13 is the great love chapter. Quoted almost every wedding. But yet, you get near the end of that chapter, he says, "When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things." You see, friends, there are 5 things that causes us as adults to act like children. 5 things. If one or a cluster of these things occurred in your life before the age of puberty, and they are rejection, incest, molestation, emotional and physical abuse, rejection, incest, molestation, emotional or physical abuse. If one or a cluster of these things occurred in your life before the age of puberty, your emotions will freeze at that point of trauma and victimization. And our ability to resolve conflict, communicate, and express love will be that as a child. Now, look at children. Children are very self-centered. They're very me-oriented. They demand instant gratification. Does a child care that you got your hands in something else and you're extremely busy, and when they cry they want to be fed, held, or changed? They don't care what you're doing. It's all about me. Cute for a child, but translate that into an adult behavior. When everything is focused on them and not their spouse. You know, science has shown that children before the age of puberty do not have the ability to see the big picture. They can only focus on one thing at a time. For example, a toddler chasing a ball. Now, if a toddler's outside chasing a ball, and a ball runs into the road, does a toddler stop and look to the left and to the right, see if any cars coming? No. All they can see is the ball, and they're going after the ball because they do not have the chemical release in their brain to see the big picture of the world around them. Everything is focused right here on me, what I can see, and I can only handle one thing at a time. And marriage just can play out as a mine versus ours. These are my tools. These are my books. These are my CDs. These are mine. It's generally a 2-year-old that says things are mine. And so if you had trauma in your life before the age of 2, then the way you resolve conflict may be that as a 2-year-old. This is mine. I don't want you touching my stuff. I had a problem. I love to read. Reading is a passion of mine. But you know, when you read a book, there's a reason they have bookmarks. I hate when people fold dog-ear a page in my book. When I loan my books out, if a page was dog-eared, it became your book. I'm pretty anal about certain things. But my wife would do that all the time. She folded it. I said, sorry, you can't read any of my books unless you can respect my stuff. Well, that's a 2-year-old acting like that. And I had to learn to get over that and die to self in that area. Now, in communication, a child's communication is undisciplined, it's self-centered, it's immature, it's manipulative, it's pouting, temper tantrum, or not owning their problem. Instead of accepting responsibility, they will communicate that it was always somebody else's fault. Now, you guys have been married, most of you here have been married a long enough time. Now, I'm sure you don't say, well, I'm going to take my ball and go home and play. I don't throw tantrums anymore. I don't give you the cold treatment anymore, the silent treatment anymore. I'm not going to go and shut the door and not talk to you for 3 days. Guilty. I would pout, didn't get my way. Then no. I thought, well, if you just give me what I want. Kids love that, don't they? Give me what I want, I'll be good. Until the next thing happens. But it's cute as a child, but are you seeing what I'm saying? How childlike behaviors carry over into adulthood because of the wounds of our past? The wounds, reactive behaviors where the wounds of our past drive our behavior. And we sometimes don't know why we do the things that we do. We just react. That's why it's called reactive behavior. It's a subconscious expression of something that has been traumatized in your life. I remember one time my daughter, when she was real little, and of course, I traveled a lot. I was in sales and ministry, so I would travel all the time. And every time I go somewhere, I bring her a stuffed animal. She had so many stuffed animals, she didn't know what to do with them. But she had this one that she still has to this day. It's hers. And so when she was just learning how to talk, we'd say, what do you want to name? It's a little panda bear. A boo-boo. It's a boo-boo. So we call it a boo or a boo-boo. That's the name of her stuffed bear till this day at 32. So I remember one day walking into her bedroom, and she had it made. She had this nice color form. Remember the color form things that you can put against the wall where you can stick things onto it? You can write with crayon and stuff like that because we can wash it off. So she knew the only place on these walls that you were supposed to write or do anything was where the color forms were. I come into her bedroom one day, and I see the back wall's got crayon marks and figures and stuff. I go, who did that? A boo-boo. I said, a boo-boo did that? I'm going to beat the stuffings out of that bear. Give me that bear. No, Dad, I'll take care of it. No, Dad, I'll take care of it. You better. I don't want that bear writing on the walls. I said, no, we can write on the wall, right on the color form. I'm a young parent. I had to learn just like the rest of us. But see, the point is she wouldn't take ownership. It was easy to blame somebody else. And we as adults will do the same thing. We will blame someone else for our dissatisfaction in our marriage, in our relationship, in life in general. My boss, he stinks. Well, maybe you're not doing something that's quite right. So we just don't want to take any responsibility. In 1 Corinthians 14:20, it says, brothers, stop thinking like children. In regard to evil, be infants, but in your thinking, be adults. The third area is experiencing a lack of love. Experiencing a lack of love. When a child grows up with their physical needs, they're being met, but there's a lack of love, they start to make inferences about what's wrong with them, that their parents aren't showing them love. Do you know that sexual abuse is not just touching inappropriately, it's also not touching appropriately? You don't hear that side. Let me say that again. Sexual abuse, sexual assault is not just touching inappropriately, it's also not touching appropriately. Children need to be hugged. They need to be loved. They need to be shown affection too. Otherwise, they begin to think something's wrong with me. Why don't they love me? They buy me things, they treat me well, but there's no affection. And so the child grows up, that's a form of sexual abuse. It's not touching appropriately. In fact, this impacts how they view themselves. It makes it difficult for them to accept or receive love from others. They may become perfectionists when they grow up. They set unreachable high standards for themselves and others. They may also struggle to open up about their feelings, and they share their deepest thoughts with their mate. On the other hand, they may grow super clingy to make up for the lack of love that they had from their parents. And that can be smothering in a relationship. So what can we do about all of this? I've talked about some of the things that happen. So how can we fix this? What we have to do is have an awareness. An awareness gives us the ability to be insightful about how our family has impacted our patterns of thought and behavior. The key to remember is that we're not looking to blame someone or to excuse or to justify our behavior. We're looking for understanding. Again, the things we can understand, we can change. It's the things we don't understand that drive us crazy. Again, the things that we understand, we can change. And it's the things that we don't understand that drive us crazy. I remember I was subpoenaed, go to Fond du Lac court one time. And I had these brochures in life skills that says, if you are teachable, you are fixable. The attorney asked me, do you believe that? I said, don't you? He goes, I guess I do. In fact, when I walked out of there after being interrogated for about an hour, the judge and all of them were shaking my hand. They said, man, that really makes sense. How many know I don't want to be there? But hey, you ask me questions, and I'm going to share with you how Jesus came in and how Jesus can fix this, how he can bring healing to our craziness. And they were just, the judge literally was applauding me as I was walking out, and the attorney got up and shook my hand. The opposing attorney. I thought it was funny. But our core beliefs are shaped in large by our family of origin. So it can be critical to get a handle on how our experiences have impacted us and how to make changes where necessary to create a new belief, new thoughts, and a new set of behaviors. See, friends, when we get married, when people get married, they bring with them hidden expectations that they learn from their family of origin. In many instances, these expectations are unknown to the person that has them. Many times, a spouse will say or do something that triggers a reactive behavior where the wounds of our past drive our behavior. It's a subconscious reaction. Let me share with you a story about myself. 1980, I moved to Sheboygan, and I was working in a furniture factory. And I started out assembling furniture. That's what I did. I assembled furniture. We made hotel, motel, contract furniture. This company has been in business for 95 years, and they hired me, and there was no jobs to be found in 1980. But they hired me. They gave me a shot. I began to get promoted in that company. I became a lead person, and then I became a supervisor, teaching people how to assemble furniture. That's what I did. Then I got moved into the office to write instructions on how to build furniture like an engineer. But here's the crazy thing. Whenever my wife would bring something home from a store, a piece of furniture that I would have to put together, I would get livid. I said, why can't you buy the stuff put together? Why do I got to put it together? She goes, you do this for a living. I said, what's your point? I don't want to do this. In fact, I'm not going to do this. And I wouldn't talk to her for 2 or 3 days. I'd go to my room. I'd walk by. She bought me a handsaw, and she took it out of the box before I would. I wasn't going to use it. Well, that's pretty strange. Isn't that pretty stupid? I mean, what's wrong? Then I go, that doesn't make sense. I mean, this is what I do for a living. What is the deal with me? And this went on for probably 10 years, which is God's grace. She stayed with me because every time she would do this, I would react the same way. So when I began to do some study and research upon the power of the subconscious mind, a subconscious mind is fully developed within the 3rd trimester of the womb. A child is taking in data, whether it will ever use it or not. They're taking in all this information. Within the 3rd trimester of the womb, your subconscious is fully developed. So I was sitting there going through this class, and all of a sudden, it was like I was transported back in time. I saw myself as an 8-year-old boy, and I had repressed this emotion because it was so deeply hurtful to me. I saw myself as an 8-year-old boy sitting by my dad, and I remember I told you how poor we were as a family. He had to fix a part on his car, and he said to me, Junior, when I tell you, take this part out of the box, hand it to me so I can put it onto the car. But you got to do it quickly because it's a very awkward situation the way I'm holding my hand. I said, okay. So what does an 8-year-old boy do? I take it out of the box and say, he says, okay, Junior, give it to me. I give him 2 pieces. My dad went ballistic. He says, you are the dumbest SOB I have ever seen. You make me sick. I don't want you near me. Get away from me. Now, my wife brings me something home, says, honey, take this out of the box and fix it for me. My subconscious mind says, no. Because if I take this out of the box, I'm a dumb SOB, I'm going to break this and you're going to hate me. You see how deeply that wound was in my subconscious? And then, one of the ways I fixed that is to say, wait a minute, this is my wife asking me to do this. This is not my dad. But yet, my subconscious mind had made an imprint of that trauma that occurred in my life. And so every time I was asked to take something out of a box, I was very nervous and reactive. I wouldn't do it. It's because I didn't want to be rejected and yelled at by someone who loved me. And after I realized that, I said, wait a minute, this is my wife. So my brain creates a new baseline. So it doesn't go back to my dad anymore. It goes back to me helping my wife. Because I've given it a reality check and said, this is my new reality. This is my new normal. You see how we're wired? How these things can affect us? You know what my wife did shortly after that? She takes me to IKEA. I've just been through trauma, and you want to take me to IKEA? But see, I've got 7, 8 shelves of books because I'm a fanatic reader without the dog edges. I like to read. And so we took this to my office, which was at Great Marriages at the time, and within an hour and a half, I had built all 7 bookshelves and had them up. Years before that, they would still be in this box to this day because I would not have touched it until I had to reality check that the problem was me. And so there are a lot of things in our own lives that we need to take to the cross. So addressing these old wounds could include forgiving yourself and then forgiving others, becoming conscious of them, and working on not letting them affect your marriage. 1 Peter 5 says, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. That's the devil's signature strength. He devours. The devil wants to devour your marriage. He wants to devour your dreams, your ideas, your visions, your unfulfilled desires. Satan is trying to abort God's plan for your lives. If Satan can stop the conception or hinder your emotional development, then he need not worry about his future because you're too immature to do anything about it. John 10:10, the thief comes not to except to steal, kill, and to destroy. Jesus says, I have come that you may have life and that you may have it abundantly. So let me share quickly just some techniques here that we can do when you're aware. First thing is what I call active listening techniques. You're sitting down with your spouse, you recognize, hey, we're different. I mean, I shouldn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that we're different, but we're having some conflict here. Let's try to resolve this. Let's find out why we're having this conflict. Where did it come from? And how can we adjust this and do something about it so that we can become the people that God wants us to be? The first thing in active listening is learning how to mirror. Mirror is simply paraphrasing in your own words what you think the other person has said. For example, what I hear you saying is, or do you mean this? Because there's so many different things that your brain can filter when conversation has taken place. You know, and so you want to make sure you ask that you're paraphrasing in your own words what that person said. This is what I hear you saying. Is that true? And clarifying is the second thing. Mirroring's number one. Clarifying is asking questions to get more information. And this will let the other person know that you're interested in what they're saying. Help me understand this. When you say this, do you mean this? So it's mirroring and clarifying. And then the thing is feedback. Good listening technique is feedback. Let the person know about your perceptions. This is how I feel when you say this. Or what's happening inside you concerning a situation or discussion at hand. This should be immediate, honest, and supportive. And again, you're not attacking. You're saying, this is how I feel. You can't argue with a person's emotions. This is how I feel. So I can say, I feel this way. When you say this, when you do this, this is my perception. This is what I'm feeling right now when you do that. And it may not be your intention at all, but this is how I'm interpreting it. Is it clear? Am I on the right page here? Help me understand. Empathy. Every time I have marriage counseling, one of the first things I will say is this. You do not have to agree with each other, but try to see the problem from each other's perspective. Try to understand where are they coming from and why they feel and believe what they believe. That's empathy. Trying to understand what the other person is feeling. Again, you don't have to agree, but try to understand. Because we're men and women, we're never fully going to process information exactly the same, and that's okay. That's the fun part. That's why God made us different. And when we recognize that we're different, that we process information differently, we're going to draw different conclusions. Even though we look at the exact same information, we may draw different conclusions. That's okay if you understand this is how and why they process it this way. And it may require you coming together to find a happy medium to resolve that. It doesn't make one right or the other one wrong. It doesn't make the other one smarter or dumber than the other person. It just means that you're processing information differently. That's how God created us. That's what's great about it. Openness, trying to see the other person's perspective. Listen to the whole statement. Don't make premature evaluations. I learned this in counseling a long time ago. If I get an engineer that would come in and talk to me, he would go back to the origin of everything before he'd get to what he really wanted to talk to me about. And I had to sift through that. And I'm thinking in my mind, let me just tell you how to fix this. But that was not the real problem. I had to hear all this so he can give me, because that's how they're wired. They had to process all this information to get to the actual question. But so many times we have a premature and a preconceived answer to their question. We just wish they would shut up so we can fix the problem. Then we can get back to the TV program or the ball game. Right? Am I being honest with you? I mean, hey, I've been there. I lived there. But I've learned that everyone is different, and you have to allow them to process and listen to understand. Stephen Covey said, seek first to understand before being understood. And that's what this is saying here. Try to understand before you interject your opinion. Try to understand their side first. Here's some good listening techniques, some keys to be a good listener. Good eye contact is critical. Look the person in the eye, because the eye is the window to the soul. Look them in the eyes. I don't mean glare at them or stare them down or burn a hole in them. I mean, look them in the eye and show them the kindness and the tenderness of your heart. Lean slightly forward. Maybe you reinforce by nodding or paraphrasing. Clarify by asking questions. Avoid distractions. And again, try to understand empathetically what was being said. That's some good keys to being a good listener. Good eye contact, lean slightly forward, reinforce by nodding or paraphrasing, clarify by asking questions. Avoid distractions. I mean, if you're trying to have a family conversation, the kids are running around, ask someone to watch the kids because it's critical that this gets resolved. Try to understand empathetically what was said. Now, in closing, let me just share some quick principles of conflict resolution. There are some great resources. You can go on Google and just type in conflict resolution, and there are some great things that Prepare and Rich that I was just telling you about. They have a great 10-step worksheet that you can use for resolving conflict. But the main thing is you have to define the issue or the problem, because you and I may have a different idea what the problem is. So we need to define what is it. What's the conflict problem? What are we facing here? So try to define that. And then hear each other's perspective or opinion. Tell me why you feel that way. And so both of you know, the main thing I've learned is that we have to feel comfortable enough with our spouse that I can share how I'm really feeling without feeling that you're going to attack me or judge me. I need to share my heart. And I'm just not getting something right now, so I need to feel safe. I need to feel safe with my spouse so I can really share, knowing they're not going to judge me, criticize me, or can rebuke me or condemn me, but they're going to try to understand why I feel the way I feel. You may want to list the pros and the cons. Are there any options in this thing and list those options? Maybe ask what is needed for option one to take place. Is it a workable option? Sometimes I may have to agree just to table it. We're not getting anywhere. We just may have to table this for a bit. And maybe allow it to stay on the table for a while. You know, is there something that we're missing? Is there another option? Do I need to consult a third-party person or seek someone's wise counsel? Perhaps the issue is not really a solvable one. We may just be disappointed, and we're just going to have to live with the outcome. And not that we rub it in each other's face, but we're going to say, hey, you know, we're really not getting anywhere with this. And reality is, that's how you see it. This is how I see it. We're just going to have to live with this. In fact, if either one senses themselves getting heated to the point that they cannot reasonably talk, I always encourage them to take a 20-minute break. Take a time out. I have the stand timer in my microwave, no Panasonic, that every time I say, okay, we need to take a little break. We need to process this. We need to go to separate corners, so to speak. We'll come out when the bell rings. Let's go to separate corners. And I'd push that stand timer. Sometimes I'd sneak back in and give myself another 20 minutes because I just ain't ready to talk yet. But yeah, that's okay if you agree to the ground rules, that we need to take a time out because we need to be at our best to resolve this. And so it's okay to take a time out, but the point is you've got to come back and resolve it. Come back and resolve it. Don't hope that the other person will just forget about it. You want to make sure, show them that you're committed to the relationship by being punctual and coming back to resolve it. Okay, are we good? Can we pick this up now? Let's review where we're at, and let's walk through this. In closing, let me give you three Twitter points. If you anybody Twitters, you can do this. 3 Twitter points of this whole message. Number 1, we have to remember to attack the problem and not each other. When there's a conflict, attack the problem and not each other. Number 2, we have to remember that we're on the same team. We're not adversaries. God brought us together till death do us part. We are on the same team. And then finally, if you get nothing else, anything I've said, this one point is something I would encourage you to write it down. If you do a needlepoint or whatever, this might be something you might want to put up. The value of the relationship is greater than the conflict of the moment. Start with that. Let's start with that. That's the end in mind, that the value of our relationship is greater than the conflict of the moment. And if you would go into any conflict resolution with this as the beginning point, that this is our premise, that the value of our relationship is greater than the conflict of the moment. What you're saying is, we're going to get through this. We're going to work through this. And when we get through this, we're going to be stronger and healthier. And so, friends, I hope that you saw here today how that our family of origin can greatly impact our current marriages. Again, we're not looking for someone to blame. We're looking for understanding, because the things we understand, we can change. It's what we don't understand that drive us crazy. Amen? Let me close in prayer. Father, I thank you so much for just what we're able to share here today. I pray, Lord, that it will give us the ability to be the spouses you've called us to be, strengthen our marriages, and use these tools to help others maybe resolve some of the issues they're experiencing in their own marriages as well. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, guys.
So I hope you enjoyed Pastor Andy's presentation. I was feverishly taking notes. Some of the things that I took away from his presentation would be the only person I can change is myself. Sometimes it's so easy to have those high expectations and you want the person to think the way you do and do things the way you do, and in reality that just doesn't happen. So I can only change myself. Emotionally and behaviorally, we take our families with us. So if you've had struggles in your family of origin or abuse, trauma, we do take those things with us. So we have to be consciously aware of that as we're trying to understand our spouse or our partner. How would you like to be married to you? That's a good one. Some days probably not so much. Learn to attack the problem, not each other. Love that. Those channels that he talked about, attached to the email that you received with this link, there's going to be a little channel assessment, so you can figure out what channel you are. So look for that if you didn't see that when you opened up your email. Also love 95% of marriage conflict stems from unresolved issues from the age of 8 or 9. The things we understand we can change. The things we can't understand drive us crazy. Very true. If you are teachable, you are fixable. So have an open mind. If you heard something, be willing to be teachable. Active listening techniques, love those. We're on the same team. Don't forget that. And then, of course, Pastor Andy usually ends his communication talks with the value of your relationship is greater than the conflict of the moment. So if you're experiencing conflict right now, just remember and remind each other that the value of your relationship is worth more than the conflict of the moment. A couple housekeeping things. If you are having conflict right now and you want to go through that couple-to-couple mentoring program that we offer, just give us a call, 920-783-6142, and we would be happy to get you registered for that program, or if you just want more information on what it's all about. And then share this link with your friends on social media or just email it to them. We want as many people as possible to be able to hear this message. And lastly, also attached to your email would be an evaluation. We really, really would appreciate it if you filled it out. It helps us know, do you like this format? Do you like this talk? Should we do it again? Please fill that out for us, because it really helps us plan for the future. So again, thank you for joining us. And give us a call. We are here to help you during this time. Even though our office is closed to the public, we are available by phone, and our mentor couples are meeting face-to-face or online. So thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day or evening.